How do you define a community? So Justice Alito was describing how New Jersey has so many tightly woven municipalities close together. And here, the Chief Justice was asking about whether if grants pass, if there was a new homeless shelter with lots of beds right across the border 10 minutes away, could that be taken into account? And I think there was some back and forth and not necessarily agreement on that. What is your position? How do you define a community? Take that example of a homeless shelter right outside the limits of Grants Pass.
Yes. So to answer that hypothetical first, I'm not concerned. I don't have any problems with saying that a homeless person in Grants Pass has legal and physical access to a shelter that's just over the lines, if that's in fact true. Lots of jurisdictions limit their homeless shelters to people who are residents. So, and just to be clear, there was no suggestion in the record here that there were any shelters available outside of Grants Pass.
Understood. But so community doesn't need to be determined by jurisdictional lines, is what you're telling me, as a matter of because let's see, I'm asking all of this because in response to Justice Sotomayor, you were pointing out that our nation has a history and tradition of not saying you can shunt homeless people or the poor out of your jurisdiction and onto others. So, or out of your community and onto others, is I think how you phrased it. So I'm asking, how do we know what those lines are? And you're saying it doesn't have to be jurisdiction specific.
No, I think jurisdiction matters because that tells us kind of the lines in which whatever ordinance or statute applies. So when shelter is available, the ordinances are enforceable because they punish the conduct of not going to the shelter as opposed to the status of homelessness. So I think that a municipality can punish the conduct of not going to a shelter that's just over the line if you have physical and legal access to it. Now, for the reasons you say, and this dates back to our settlement system at the founding era, a lot of municipalities do not allow people from outside of the jurisdiction to use their shelters, and so under those circumstances, the shelter wouldn't be legally available.
Is that cruel and unusual punishment for them to turn away someone who wants to use their shelter?
No, that wouldn't be punishment. Punishment is the infliction of suffering for a crime.
Counsel,
well, then why is the Eighth Amendment implicated in this case?
Because here we have fines and jail time. We have a status-based punishment scheme that is, in fact, inflicting punishment within the meaning of the Eighth Amendment.
Counsel, do you want to? Oh, I'm sorry, Chief.
No, I'm done. That's fine.
Do you want to address some of the line drawing problems that we've been going back and forth? I mean, Justice Gorsuch pointed out, eating is a basic human need, and it's not the case that soup kitchens or social services will always be able to meet it. And so he asked about whether the Eighth Amendment would prohibit punishment for stealing food. You might ask the same questions about trespass and squatting in structures if they're, if that was the best alternative. So how do we draw these difficult lines about, public urination and that sort of things?
So I'll start with stealing food. Stealing food is not part of the definition of homelessness, and it's also not a universal attribute. So I would put that outside the scope of any of the arguments we're making here. With respect to public urination and defecation, if you had I don't think this would ever exist, but if you had a law that said homeless people cannot urinate or defecate anywhere within city limits, I think then it starts to look like this case. But if you're saying that people can't urinate or defecate on public property, it's hard to imagine a situation where
to go. So a homeless person, there's no facilities available, and a homeless person has no place else to go.
You might have there are commercial establishments. I don't know that anyone's pointed to a jurisdiction where you truly don't have access. But if we
what's the constitutional principle?
Right.
Take my hypothetical. Say there's not commercial establishments, don't want non-patrons coming in to use the facilities. There are no public facilities, and it's a generally applicable rule that says no public urination.
So I think one distinction between urination and defecation and sleeping is that sleeping outside is part of the definition of homelessness, right? Homelessness is lacking a fixed, regular nighttime address. So the sleeping prohibition goes more directly to the status of homelessness than urination or defecation.
So it would not violate the Eighth Amendment to punish public urination and defecation?
You might come up with some different theory, but it's not the theory that we're
not the theory that you're.
Yes.
Okay.